Today we have a crazy entitled parent story of a grandfather misbehaving at their grandchild's game. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, my mom used me to control my dad and then basically sold me to him. I, 22-year-old female, made a post a couple of weeks ago about her, 54-year-old female, taking a picture of my ID and getting mad because I didn't appreciate her doing that. Why is my ID in your phone to prove a point to me? I ended up having to lock my credits. She went to jail for a year for fraud when I was 3 years old, but today is worse. I thought I was tripping all of these years, until my two sisters she gave away to their grandmother confronted her about something similar today. When I was younger, she would use me against my dad, threaten him to never see me again. He isn't exactly great either, but basically in 2016 when I was 14, we were in Walmart and I overheard them talking and she asked him for money. She said, "Thanks, you can keep her however long you want." I thought I was tripping all of these years. My sisters and I were separated as children. I only saw them a few times, but as we got older, we got closer as they lived with their grandmother. They also got closer with narcissistic mom, and we never had the conversation of her giving them away and never coming around. On FaceTime, they mentioned their grandmother said one of my sisters, 24-year-old female, showed up with holes in her underwear. They also mentioned how they saw a letter to their grandmother from my mom asking for payment from grandmother, and mom goes, "Maybe a letter from me to her as I was paying," and they said, "No, you got paid." She wasn't trying to hear them out. She also gets jealous that they call their grandmother Mama and calls her by her first name. Another one of my sisters, now 36, said she was SA'd when she was younger by N-Mom's ex-boyfriend, but N-Mom didn't believe her. Even her husband mentioned this to my mom during an argument saying, "My wife said she told you she was SA'd and you didn't believe her." My N-Mom's ex-boyfriend is the same man that said if she walked by him again, in an attempt to start drama, he would end her. She bothered him, and I saw him stab her in the chest and hit her with a shovel when I was 3. I also have very vivid memory of him watching me bathe and being in the bed with him. It's nothing more than that, just those quick pictures of memory, but I won't accuse him of doing anything to me. I have a sister I never met that lives in Cali with her father since she was a kid. She's now 33. My mom freaked my credit up and I had to dispute a $800 debt when I turned 18. I'm working on moving out by the end of the year. She's hard to deal with. I couldn't get a job until I was 19 because she's been in government housing, SSI, since I was a kid. I've only ever known her to have one job and one car my entire life. She also tried to tell the psychiatrist I was crazy when I was a kid because I was acting out. And she promised me candy when I was 5 to lie that I was crazy and get a check from the government. And she basically took over the whole time and made me shut up. I was forced to wear glasses I didn't need. Now I really need them. I was diagnosed with stuff and thrown into behavioral health and diagnosed with anger problems and other things. I was forced to take medicine for these behavioral issues, so she could paint me as crazy for money when I was really going through abuse and burnout from my dad and her. Honestly, the list of things OP's sharing here that they went through is crazy. And honestly, I'm left a bit baffled that OP isn't seeming way more upset and furious about what happened to them. I mean, all things considered, their writing kind of reads relatively calm despite all this ridiculousness. OP added, "Also, I forgot to add when my sister said, 'No, she paid you,' she said, 'Maybe I did, I wasn't in my right mind, my mom had just died.' But a decade or so later, she did the same thing to me and her mom died in 2000 to 2003. Nobody close to us died in 2016. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of entitled parents, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? That said, our next story is, Entitled Aunt wants us to give all of our Skylanders to her son. Hi Reddit, this story takes place when I was 10 years old, but I still remember it vividly due to me and my best friend Nick laughing about it to this very day. For context, my best friend Nick invited me to his Christmas party. It was on the 6th of December, so naturally, I was excited about all the new Skylanders I would get for Christmas, as well as the party. Now, back when I was 10 years old, Skylanders was one of the hottest games back in 2012. Now, on to the story. I remember we were going to play Skylanders Giants, which was the most recent game that came out at the time. I remember bringing all of my Skylanders to Nick's house. Now, my best friend Nick had all of the Skylanders at the time. This is how our conversation went. I said, "Whoa, how did you get all of those new Skylanders?" He said, I just started doing chores for people in the neighborhood, and I got paid. I used the money to buy all the new Skylanders. I said, dude, your collection is epic. He said, thanks, man. We're now playing Skylanders Giants. We were laughing and having a good time. It was perfect. Half an hour later, Nick recognizes a familiar voice saying in an obnoxious tone, I'm here. As soon as we hear this, Nick's laughter fades. I asked him if he's okay. This is how our conversation went. Nick, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Nick, with anger and fear in his voice, said, no, I am not okay. This is not happening. I said, what's wrong? He replied with anger in his voice, my aunt is here with my cousin. I asked him, what's the big deal? It can't be that bad, right? With fear in his voice, he said, no, you don't understand. My aunt is crazy entitled. If I have anything before her hex spawn does, she yells and screams until I either get rid of it or give it to him. I said, oh, okay, let's just play the game. It'll help get your mind off things. He replied, okay. Not even 5 minutes later do we hear a knock on the door. Surprise, surprise, it's the entitled aunt and her hex spawn. Her hex spawn makes a beeline for Nick's and my Skylanders. He excitedly tells his mom that he wants all of the Skylanders that I and Nick have. Entitled aunt starts asking questions such as, how much did all of these Skylanders cost, etc. Once I told her the price of all of the Skylanders, I and Nick start to have a conversation with the entitled aunt. This is how our conversation went. Entitled aunt said to us, well, my gift budget's already stretched. Can you both just give me your Skylanders? Me and Nick say, no, we spent a lot of money on these Skylanders. We won't just give them to you. The entitled kid chimes in, Mommy, I want all of these Skylanders right now. Entitled aunt is yelling at this point. See, you're making my son upset. I hope you know that you're ruining his Christmas. I tell her, as I already said to you, we can't give you our Skylanders. Entitled aunt is yelling even louder at this point, and I'm starting to see red with this woman. Nick's mom comes into the room because of the noise and wonders what's going on. The entitled mother, in classic entitled parent fashion, starts spewing lies about me and Nick to try to cover her bum and make me and Nick look like the bad guys. Nick's mom is not believing anything that entitled aunt says, and we tell her our side of the story. This is how the conversation went. Nick's mom said, all right, boys, what really happened? Me and Nick say, entitled aunt and entitled kid saw our Skylanders, and entitled aunt asked if we can give our Skylanders to entitled kid. We said no, and then she got mad. His mom replies, I thought so. The entitled aunt is beat red at this point and starts to make a run for it. We share a laugh and continue to play the game and enjoy the party. I had a great time at the party, if you were wondering. I'm surprised that they were actually trying to just show up and bully the kids into handing it over, and trying to get out of there with all of that stuff before they would ever get caught? Because when the mom comes in and finds out the very clear truth, they make a run for it? Ed Ked said, I'm wondering if entitled aunt is Nick's mom's sister or her sister-in-law. Not that it changes much about entitled aunt being horrible or the mom being a hero. It just adds an interesting shade to the dynamic. Our next story is, Mother is praying for me to be a disabled person in a wheelchair. Yes, it's completely true because I reject to be slave girl to the Islamic customs and traditions imposed on females. I do everything, clean my room, my clothes, the dishes I use, but she doesn't say anything to my male brothers or her husband. Rather, she comes to me and tells me that I never help her, instead of telling them to stop being lazy like her. If I write a long paragraph here of what she said, it will never end. She's blaming me for her life choices and says to me, I destroyed her life. When I try to be independent from her, this is what happens. She tells me that I'm a selfish daughter. Because of the bad words she said, I started to feel like I had no value. How does a mother behave like this with her children? Anyone reading this, please wish for a stronger mentality to counties the fight to get out of their home. I don't love her or the father. Both of them are sick people. They had children for a retirement plan. There are so many stories like this coming out there from countries where women are just expected and almost downright forced to just be subservient, not even housewives, just live-in maids. I mean, hearing stories of people who just desire to live their own life and be independent, and then saying that it's literally illegal in their area or their country or wherever it is that they live to even live on their own as a woman? You can send them all the well wishes you want, but how does one escape something like that? Say What KB wrote, My heart hurts for you. I'm sorry your parents are like this. Many use religion to make women subservient to men, and sadly, many women buy into this and allow themselves to be limited and controlled. Years and years ago, I went to a lecture about mothers and daughters. The researchers found the mothers were often jealous of their daughters' freedoms and abilities to make their own life choices. Even moms who were supportive of their young daughters and who encouraged them to get a good education and independent jobs sometimes went so far as to sabotage those same daughters as they left home and were seen to surpass the mother's accomplishments. Why? They saw their daughters make different life choices, such as having a job but not a family, or balancing work and family, or making decisions without checking with husband for permission. And the moms felt bad. They felt their daughter's independence was a criticism of their life choices. They felt that the daughter's independence was a slap in the face to their own life choices. Your mom has swallowed the message that God wants women to be less than men, to exist only to serve men, so she has made that her life. Her words blaming you for what is bad in her life are just a way to sabotage you. If you do things differently, she has to re-examine her own choices. If you can be independent, then you're not holding her back from anything. Pity her if you can, hate her if you can't, but love yourself. I cannot believe God wants one half of the humanity to be less than, to be enslaved to the other half of humanity, nor is any mother meant to be so mean and hateful to the miraculous gift of a child. I pray for you to have strength and for you to know that you have worth in and of yourself. Our next story is, I love my mother, but I don't like her. I moved to another continent to get away from home. I came to visit after 5 years. My mother is strictly religious. I am not. After I lost my father, I realized that I'm not as rigid in religion as my mother is. I came home with a tattoo, my thigh-length hairs cut shorter to mid-length. I got a bad case of dandruff and I had to cut them to a manageable length. Also, I felt like it. And my earlobes pierced because I wanted to feel more like a female than I am. I get lectured at least 5 times a day that I'm bringing shame to the family, I'm setting a bad example for my younger sibling, I should promise not to cut my hair ever again, I should promise to let her find a husband for me, I should promise that I would marry her choice and come as a religious person when I come visit the next time, etc. She checks my phone and has the audacity to ask me about the conversation I had with my cousin. What the heck? And with my friends, all girls, I'm not stupid to leave any conversation with any boys on my phone. I can't talk to her at all without her turning the simple conversation to a lecture. I have bigger problems going on in my life, but I'm all alone. She thinks she's supportive of me, but all she does is hold my past mistakes against me, forcing me to hide my hair in a tight bun, my tattoo in full sleeves, my piercing in a veil is not being supportive, mother. I am 24 years old. I feel like 15. I would like to vent a little more. I've tried many times to confront her, and here is the pattern I've detected. She would try her best to cut in the middle of my point. She would bring up my mistakes from the past to make me feel guilty. She would blame my father for dying and leaving me to her as a liability. She would accentuate the fact that I'm now responsible for my dead father's name and reputation. She would blame her fate for having children who are going to be the reason that she's going to be named as a bad mother for not teaching us by the society. She would say that now that her husband is gone, she has no support left, and her death will come soon too. Then she would say that I should not cry after she dies and live my life just like I want, as a stray. Then she would cry hysterically. There is so much attempted manipulation, it's just not even worth it to have a relationship. Like, man, forget long or middle-length hair. If I had to deal with her on a daily basis or even a weekly basis, I'd lose the rest of my hair. Best Confidence 1560 said, "If I was you before you leave, I would tell your mother that she has damaged her relationship with you and you feel like all she does is criticize and put you down. I would tell her that religion is not an excuse for treating somebody like garbage. Spend time bonding with your brother. Make him realize that what he's seeing at home isn't necessarily how life has to be. That there are other mothers who aren't like this. Let him know that you're somebody he can talk to and trust, and that when the time is right and he's old enough, if he wants to get out of there, you'll help him. Sorry your mother's so horrible." This next story is, my daughter's father sent a priest to harass me. I had no intentions to do a new post, but today absolutely took the cake. To those that don't know, my daughter, 6 years old, was born from a one-night stand with Jeff. We were never romantically involved. It was a simple one-night stand and we did use contraceptives, but they failed. It happens. A few months ago, Jeff went full psycho and tried to convince me to leave my daughter with him so she could serve as a replacement child for his wife, who recently lost their infant daughter. I refused, and right now we're in the middle of some legal issues. Now, for today, I thankfully didn't deal with Jeff. Instead, he sent a priest to harass me at work. I'm going to be very blunt. I am completely detached from religion. I'm not an atheist, just don't really like the idea of the Catholic Church. That's the leading religion in my home country. I respect it, and most of my family is Catholic, so I have a detached respect for church officials. Today I was doing some paperwork when I got a call about a priest asking for me. I didn't have any meetings scheduled, and a lot of times we get visits from clergy asking for donations or participation in events, so I figured that was it. I told the secretary to let him in, and things at first seemed rather polite. Shake hands, asking how things were, the usual chit-chat. Then the priest began talking about how it had come to his attention that I was a single woman with a child, and that apparently I'd lived a life of debauchery and hate. His words, I was taken aback and agreed I was a single mother, but that I didn't see how I lived in debauchery and hate. The priest then went on about how he knew my daughter is prohibited from spending time with her father, and that I'm constantly sleeping around with men instead of living a godly life. How he was worried and thought it would be best I considered giving my daughter a chance to live with a proper family rather than see me sell myself. Angry was an understatement. I did keep it civil simply because I was at work and had no intentions of screaming to a religious man at work. I simply told him that my daughter was fine with me, she lived a safe and happy life, my personal affairs were my own, and that I had no intentions of sending her to another household. I told him that if there was nothing else, he should probably leave as I had other things to attend to. He then showed his hand, and that's how I know it was Jeff's doing. The priest told me he didn't think my daughter would be a happy child with me, but her father was well respected in his church, and he knew he would raise a proper Christian lady. At that, I laughed and simply said, no. I once again recommended he left, and if he didn't, I would be calling security. He left, saying he would try to speak to me again when I'm not being hysterical. I told my secretary and our security to not let him into my office again, and I called my lawyer. I don't have audio, but we do have security feed from him walking into my office. Thank you again to everyone sending well wishes in my previous post. We're still working on that move, but school is back and she's loving it. We still have that temporary restraining order against Jeff and his wife, and school officials know it. If this guy even dares to show up again, don't be afraid to use very reasonable resources. Doesn't have to be 911 or the emergency line, but like this dude saying, don't worry, I'll be back when you're not hysteric to talk to you again. I don't think that's going to fly in most people's eyes. Prudence Rigby wrote, file a police report for harassment by the priest. Ask your lawyer to write a letter stating that if he tries to harass you again, you will be forced to seek legal action. Priest is lucky he didn't get someone like me. My mouth would have more than implied his child-praying self needed not concern himself with my child. Then I would have asked how many cases his church had, then his region, and so on, and that his concern is better served there. Oh man, am I angry for you. Our next story is, parents think watching their dog is more important than studying for finals. Disclaimer, this is the point of view of my girlfriend, as she doesn't have Reddit but still wants advice. I had her full permission to post this. We're in Olive Garden, and not even 5 minutes into getting there, my dad asks what I'm doing in the middle of April. I explained I'm finishing up a ton of college projects and homework and have no free time since I graduate in May. They then proceed to ask me to dog sit so they can go to their niece's wedding. My grandma loves watching the dog, and will do it for the whole week. But my parents have concerns in case she would fall or hurt herself and nobody's around to help, so they want me to give her a break for a weekend in the middle of April, and I explained that I probably won't be able to since weekends are my only time to relax a little, and I wake up at 4 a.m. for clinicals and I have to study for finals. This got my mom to respond really loudly, great, so you're going to prevent me from going to the wedding. And I literally brought up the point of my grandma watching him, and I said about putting the dog in a kennel, and my mom gasped and said, "But he'll die," so loudly the other tables could probably hear, and I just responded with, "Well, you should have done it since he was a puppy to get used to it." And of course my dad just says, "I don't know why we help you when you refuse to help us," as if I don't constantly go out of my way driving an hour to go dog sit on weekends. They're blaming me for not being able to attend a wedding because I'm finishing up my final month of college, and they don't understand the intensity of finishing a degree in respiratory therapy. Every conversation is something along the lines of my mother making everything about her and her health, and my father guilt-tripping me nearly every time we speak. They constantly ask our church to check up on me about my faith, since I no longer go, realizing it for a cult. So when me and my boyfriend move in a few months, I'm debating on limiting contact or no constant, but I'm worried about the guilt I would feel. But this is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to dealing with them. OP saying no, they don't want to, that should be completely acceptable for a rational person. I mean, just reading that and hearing that, it just makes me think of those kinds of people that were in my life. It gives me like stress flashbacks. It's just so dumb, the people that you feel like you can't say no to because they will blow up, or they'll judge you or rip you apart or say that you're essentially worthless to them because you don't do everything for them. Just an old baby boomer wrote, "They can place their dang dog in a kennel, and no is a complete sentence. I would block them until after you graduate and move. You are not their slave to obey their demands. Screw their entitlement." Our next story is Entitled Boomer Grandfather Misbehaves at Grandchild's Game. This is a long one and the fallout is ongoing. Nuclear winter may be in the forecast. I have to share and vent. My 46-year-old male, septuagenarian father-in-law loves going to our kids' athletic events. Football, soccer, baseball, softball, everything. The kids are great athletes and the games are a lot of fun. Father-in-law fits the stereotypical boomer profile. White, Catholic, Republicans equal good, Democrats equal bad, Fox News talking points are gospel, and nothing that runs contrary to his beliefs has any merit, no matter how practical or logical. We live a few blocks from he and mother-in-law. We see them regularly, and my mother-in-law is my wife's, 40, best girlfriend. Mother-in-law comes over to the house several times every week. Rare is a day these two women don't speak at least once. They have a great relationship. I get frustrated with father-in-law, even as a guy that doesn't get upset about politics, but I love and support wife, and it's important to her that we have a good relationship with her mom and dad. Wife and I say to each other, "Man, he can be a ding-a-ling sometimes," but we want him in our lives and in our children's lives. We have our own flaws and understand that family can be frustrating, and that door swings both ways. In the past, we've had issues with father-in-law being overbearing at athletic events. He believes he's being supportive, but he's tone-deaf as to how he sounds, very critical when offering helpful coaching at games. This past fall, in the middle of the season, our daughter, 9, asked if we could tell father-in-law to not come to soccer games because his coaching from the sidelines, very loud and grating, was making her uncomfortable. She didn't want to hurt his feelings and wanted us to send the message. When my wife mentioned it to her mom, who then passed it along to father-in-law, and his response through mother-in-law was that our daughter would never ask him not to come to games. Well, she did. He seemed to accept that he needs to be more aware of how he comes across to the other players and parents. He sulked for a few weeks, but then got over it and was granted permission to come to games again, after a brief talk about being less of a spectacle. No apologies, no promises to reform, just a harumph and sure. Here it comes. Basketball season gets going, and my daughter's team plays well and makes it to the playoffs. We're all in the gym for a playoff game a few weeks ago, and not even a full quarter into the game, father-in-law is educating a mother from the opposing team on rules of the game. It's abrasive, not informative, it's "I'm right, you're wrong." He knows he's being argumentative, and he's happy to prove to anyone in earshot how right he is. Things get to the point where the mother is moving seats to put some distance between her and father-in-law. I tap my wife to take her attention away from our daughter playing to let her know that there's a situation. She's sitting on the other side of our group, and the noise in the gym is masking the increasing volume of the interaction. Why did I bring it to my wife's attention instead of addressing it myself? Because I've had interactions with father-in-law on this and other subjects, and my first inclination would be to tell him to shut the freak up at a volume and tone that would startle adults. As that would not be the best approach to defuse the situation, my thought was that his grown adult daughter may have more success. We're looking to put water on a brush fire, not napalm. She walks to where he is and politely asks him to let it go, then comes back to sit. A few moments later, not even a full minute, father-in-law is back to educating the other mother. Wife gets up and asks him more sternly to knock it off and then returns to her seat. Parents from both teams are looking over to see what the commotion is. It's clear to everyone what's happening. Less than a minute later, he's back at it. Wife goes over again and tells him to stop talking. Father-in-law says, "No, I will not." For some reason, this rocked me for two reasons. One, I'd never heard him speak to his daughter like that before, and two, I was floored by the lack of respect for his adult daughter and mother to 5 of his grandchildren. Maybe I'd been blind to it before, but it was so clear that he would walk over her if his ego was threatened. I was equally enraged and sad. I'd had enough. I lean over, make eye contact with him and say, loud enough to be heard over the basketball game, "Shut your mouth." I'm surprised the F word didn't make it in there. He stops talking, doesn't say a word for the rest of the game. When the game is over, he leaves without a goodbye or congratulations to my daughter for the win. Wife and I know there's going to be blowback and that I'm going to be the bad guy in father-in-law's narrative. I'm okay with that. I can be the jerk in his fiction. My ego will survive. Wife and I know what happened, and I want father-in-law to know that I'll stand up to anyone that disrespects his daughter, even him. What I'm not okay with is father-in-law's treatment of his daughter. I suggest to wife that if father-in-law is ever to come to another game, that 3 things need to happen. 1, father-in-law apologizes to wife. 2, father-in-law will behave at all functions. 3, father-in-law agrees that if anyone ever asks him to stop, he will do so immediately, strangers, coaches, referees. The next day, my wife gets a call from mother-in-law to announce father-in-law's decision on what our punishment will be. He will not come to our house if I'm there, no events where I'm present, and he will not be attending Easter Sunday brunch with us. My thought was, wow, you're going to back yourself into a corner here, aren't you? Okay, let's see how you play poker with no chips. Wife tells father-in-law through mother-in-law, because we're children and have to play telephone, that he will not be allowed to attend softball or baseball games if he maintains his position. We haven't had any direct interaction with him in a few weeks, but wife and mother-in-law talk daily. Mother-in-law is saying that father-in-law is her husband and she has to support him. Wife explains that one can support their spouse without supporting every thought, feeling, or action. Mother-in-law is in a bad spot because father-in-law is essentially pushing her to take his side for acting like a butt. Otherwise, she's not a supportive spouse. Very childlike behavior from a senior citizen. Over this past weekend, I was traveling and get a call from the wife. The Cold War has gone hot. Mother-in-law called to ask what time our daughter's softball games will be this weekend. Wife tells her the times and reminds her that she is welcome, but father-in-law is not. Mother-in-law says, "That's silly, it's been long enough." Wife says, "These are literally the first games of the season. He has not missed any athletic events. There have been no consequences for him yet. No, he is not invited." This is where things get dark. Mother-in-law ups the ante and asks if wife is planning to be at the games. Wife says that she will be, and mother-in-law says, "Then I don't want to go. Your father is wrong for not respecting you, but you need to respect him. I don't want to be around you if you can't respect your father." My heart hurt when I heard this. Wife loves her mother and they're close friends. Father-in-law is making mother-in-law stand behind his misbehavior and causing a rift between mother-in-law and wife. Wife says that she's hurt by mother-in-law, but if she wants to hurt feelings, wife will play along. Wife says there will be no contact with our families. Mother-in-law says, "You're not going to keep the grandchildren from us, are you?" Wife says, "Yes." That's where things stand as of today. I'm not sure how this will play out, but I believe father-in-law is about to learn how truly feckless he is. This is sad that it's literally ripping the family apart, but I feel like the mother-in-law does care enough that eventually at some point she's going to learn you can't stand by your man when your man is acting ridiculous like that. I just feel like the mother-in-law is bound to break and finally admit the truth at some point. Subtle Cow said, "You hardly mentioned her, but I bet your daughter is happy you're finally protecting her and the things she cares about from father-in-law. Hopefully he doesn't throw a full-blown temper tantrum at her next game and get her kicked off the team. If he's willing to be rude, insulting, and cruel to a completely random adult stranger, you can bet he's been rude, insulting, and cruel to her." But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy Entitled Parents story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.